Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
I believe that to see the looks on the faces of people from all different cultures as they know the exhilaration of winning and the agony of defeat, as we call it, that tells us something about the commonness of the human emotion.
Joining Father Bacik in today's reflections is Brad Rieger, a graduate student in special education at the University of Toledo. Today, Father Bacik and Mr. Rieger will be discussing Olympics as an international symbol. Now, here's Father Bacik.
Brad, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Olympics. And I think you have a real feel for the world of athletics and both the good and the bad that we find in it. And you've been involved in athletics all your life, and I think I've learned a lot from it. I've been impressed with the way that you respond to it and deal with it. I can remember some marvelous articles in the Toledo Blade about you and playing the University basketball for the University of Toledo, and seeing it really in a broader context than just the pure performance on the field and so on. And so that's one of the reasons I'd like to talk a bit about the Olympics with you.
Yes, that seems pretty timely.
Yeah, it does. It's timely, right, since we've had this tremendous outpouring of worldwide interest in the Olympics during this summer, and it's something that really one has to marvel at, and I think question, and to try. It raises a lot of questions in my mind. What's behind the interest? You know, how could it create this worldwide situation where I think over 2 billion people were watching Olympic events despite the boycotts in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries? You know, how does one account for all of that tremendous interest? That's one way, surely, of coming at the question as I want to deal with it. And I'll tell you, one of my answers to that is that the Olympics really function as a symbol. They are symbolic of some of the deeper aspirations of the whole human family, I believe, and as such have a great power to pull people together and to celebrate the commonness of the human family. And I want to sort of move our conversation in that direction. I suppose now, right away, you get the problem of, well, but it doesn't work that way because you got all this politics involved in the Olympics, and surely that's the case. Of course, we had our boycott of the 1980 Olympics as one of our responses to the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, and now we have the Soviet deal of not coming to our Olympics in Los Angeles in 1984, supposedly because they were afraid that their athletes couldn't be protected properly. I think that was probably one of the great glories of the Games, that it all went so well and so smoothly, and we had no great incidents, that one minor thing way at the end about a policeman, I guess, using a bomb threat and so on. But other than that, it was such a magnificently run thing, and I guess showed the contention of the Eastern Bloc that they wouldn't have been safe was surely out of line and so on. But that the politics becomes a problem, cuts into it. You know, what did the boycott mean to the Olympics and so on?
Besides the politics, you also have the commercialism.
Yes.
Taking away from maybe some of those symbols that you're talking about.
Yes. And also the excessive nationalism.
Right.
That becomes a problem.
You're dealing with some big factors that flaw some of the symbols. When you talk about symbols, what do you mean?
Well, when I say the Olympic Games function as a symbol, symbols are vivid kinds of images or events that have a power to touch us at a deeper level, at a non-literal kind of way. Symbols, like, well, the flag is a symbol of the country. The singing, the playing of the national anthem is a symbolic action. A lot of us know symbols, especially in the religious world, through liturgy. So the celebration of the Lord's Supper is a symbolic action. And the thing about symbols is that they draw us in. They touch us in a level deeper than just our heads. They touch our hearts as well. And they teach us things or help us to know things that you don't get just by adding up numbers or putting it on a computer card. There's a sort of participative knowledge that we gain. We're drawn into what they are all about. And very often symbols sort of galvanize action. They pull people together and help people to do things. So in the religious world, our clearest examples of symbolic action are our sacraments or our liturgical actions. But I believe there are also secular symbols, and there are cultural rituals, and the Olympic Games are surely that. In other words, they are not just races between people, individual participants. They have a wider meaning than that. And part of the wider meaning is of the commonness of the striving of all human beings, that we're all called upon to try to reach our potential, and that people all over the world watching those Romanian women gymnasts can just marvel at their grace. I mean, people in various cultures, in the Soviet bloc, the United States, all over, China, wherever, you watch that and you say, my heavens, that's beautiful. That's marvelous what the human body can do, the way it's responsive to spirit and so on. And therefore, this shared viewing of this large event gives us what I would call a common memory then. You realize there's a couple billion people around the world who have seen the Olympics and now have in their memory collected these Romanian gymnasts, or of Carl Lewis running, or of the marvelous marathon winner who paced himself
Mary
so well.
Yeah, the women's volleyball team.
Exactly. The Chinese volleyball team. And they have it as not just in a nationalistic way. Of course, they're all rooting for their own people, and that's part of it. But they are forced to see the excellence, the sportsmanship demonstrated by people from other cultures, and to see the common emotions. I believe that to see the looks on the faces of people from all different cultures as they know the exhilaration of winning and the agony of defeat, as we call it, that tells us something about the commonness of the human emotions in all of this.
As you said, it's a memory for the world, so to speak. And you said it is fortunate that there was no major incident, because in '76 there was a lot of, and that seemed to linger. The memory was tainted with the feeling of anything good is always invaded with something evil or bad. And it seems like in these Olympics, the good finally won out in a big sense. And like you said, there's only that one incident with the bomb threat or whatever, but it is fortunate the memory is, at least for these Olympics, are kept intact for the world.
Yeah, and in your contrast with the '76 Olympics is helpful, because as you said, I think exactly right, it marred it as a memory. I mean, whenever people talk about that Olympics, then they go back to that terrible event there, the terrorist attack and so on. So that's one way of thinking of the Olympics as a symbol. And in my mind, it's one of the few transnational symbols that we have. I mean, everyone's got their own national anthem, everyone's got their own flag, everyone has their own national history that they celebrate, and so on. But it's hard to find symbols that really pull us together as a whole human family. And I think the Olympic Games really has that power. Now, the Olympics were revived again in 1896, and I think precisely with the idea in mind that people could come from all over the world to compete in the Games, and that it would be an open, free kind of atmosphere, and where the best of the human strivings could be celebrated. And I believe that this is a thing for our modern world, and its significance, I think, becomes greater as we move into the nuclear age and into this terrible situation where we could destroy ourselves. We need symbols that will tell us that we have the commonness of human life. I love the TV pictures when they, the one program, I don't know if they did this often, the one time I was watching, it began with a view from space of the Earth. And then it gradually zeroed in on the Earth, and then I think went to Los Angeles and to the Olympic Village. To me, that was a marvelous thing to see. There's Joseph Campbell, one of the great writers on symbolism, an old man now in his 80s, but still a potent intellectual force in the United States, has said that really once we could look at our Earth from space and see it on a television screen, that really our consciousness could never be the same afterwards. Because for once, you realize that it's not just our own little bit of turf, that it's not just nationalism, it's this globe we live on, and that we've got this interesting language we talk about, our spaceship Earth. and the one globe and the global village that Marshall McLuhan talked about, and all of that. The Olympics is one of the few symbols I think we've got that collects that.
Okay, as you talk about the unifying effect and commonness that the Olympics have, I'll play the devil's advocate here.
Perfect, sure.
And how would you respond to the boycott then, the Eastern Bloc countries not coming? As you're talking about the Olympics being that symbol of unity and commonness of humanity, and then to have this feeling of, well, that humanity is not all here. How would you respond to something like that?
Well, tell me your gut reaction to it. Positive, negative, or how do you...
My gut reaction is that it gives the Olympics a sense of realism, and that's the way human nature, humanity is.
Yeah.
It can't be. Hopefully heaven will be that one unified state, and right now on Earth it's not. And I think the utopian situation that the Olympics strive for is a utopian thing, and we should try to do the best we can. And I think that these Olympics are just a perfect example of some of the human condition, that it's flawed and it'll never be perfect.
No, I like that. I think that's a really good point. I'll pick up on the realism notion that it does interject that idea that indeed we are messed up as a human family, that nationalism is often rampant and excessive. And in my way of saying it, it mars the symbol. Symbols are never perfect. I mean, we use the Lord's Supper as an example of the Eucharist, and so ideally we say the Lord's Supper is an example of community, of sharing, of fellowship, of sharing our values, and everyone participates and gets involved and sings and prays and shares the greeting of peace, and we walk out in brotherhood. Well, we all know individual liturgies don't go that well. I mean, that's the power of the symbol. That's what it calls us to. That's what it speaks of. That's the ideal it represents, but very often the actual participation in it doesn't reach that. And I think that's what happened in the Olympics. Now, and people who said, well, it doesn't matter if the Soviets are here or not, our basketball team would have blown them away anyway. That was Bobby Knight's reaction, you know. It didn't matter because then we'd have beat them no matter what anyway. I think he had rather colorful ways of saying that and so on. And but to me, that's not the point. The point isn't, you know, who would have won the gold medals and so on. The deeper point is that it mars the symbol. It cuts into this tremendous power of the Olympics to transcend nationalism, to transcend the squabbles in the human community, to rise above the political problems and so on. And so, to me, it's a great shame that it just, as you said, in one way it introduced the realism, that's how the world is, but in the other way it hurts the symbolic power of the Olympic movement, I think.
I don't remember back in 1980 being that upset with our country. I can't contrast my feelings in 1980 and what I feel now as far as, you know, the communist bloc not coming. They're really too much into politics, and it seems far removed. I didn't feel that strong because we were doing it because
of Afghanistan,
right? And I think back now, this is equally as wrong, and in my eyes, and
I think probably we mostly felt empathy for the athletes in 1980. Our athletes in the United States who had trained hard and didn't get their chance to participate. I think some people felt that way.
Right. But just when you talk about nationalism, I'm amazed at myself even being in that I'm caught up in that, and I'm not even sure. You know, I don't even realize it.
That's right. And that's always, when you live within a culture, it's hard to step out of it. And that's one of the reasons we need transnational symbols, because it relativizes our own sense of our country. It gives us really what I would think is a healthier sense of patriotism. Patriotism that says to us that I love my country, but I love it as part of an interdependent network of many countries. Many nations that make up this earth of ours and the worldwide community. It would help us get a much healthier notion of what patriotism is about. Of course, what we say in our Christian religion, in our Judeo-Christian tradition, is that we've got symbols that transcend. You know, you used a beautiful idea about heaven. You know, when you get to heaven, then it will be one family. So heaven for us is a symbol, and so is the kingdom. Jesus talks about the kingdom and the coming of the kingdom, the presence of the reign of God, as he called it. For us, that's our prime symbol of the universality of the human community, that God loves everybody. He's the Father of all and exercises maternal care on every human being who ever lived. That's the reign of God. There's no room for strife and partisanship and carving out one's own turf and so on. It is a symbol that calls us to something more. So we've got some transnational symbols out of our religious traditions. That's what religions ought to do. But very often they can't carry that out. Even religion gets nationalistic. And so that some people become more interested in Americanism than Christianity. That is their real religion. It's not the biblical religion, but it's the religion of flag and of Constitution, of Declaration of Independence and so on. And you just get an excessive nationalism going again. So that that's one of the reasons I'm big on the Olympics, the Olympic movement, and not so much as individual athletes competing, but as one of the few transnational symbols that we have.
Well, okay, question here. What do you think the image of America was to the world? I guess I think as I try to step back and view, say, from Europe, how does America? I know there's a lot of old baggage coming with just the Olympics, but just how the America came across to the world.
Well, as you well know, the press reports are very often that they were appalled at what they thought of as the excessive nationalism. So every time you turned around, the American national anthem was being played, and of course all the medal winners were so many from the United States, and so all the profiles and the close-ups and the winners and all that were so often from the United States that I think that they felt it was excessively nationalistic. Those are the reports that I heard, and one could understand that. You know, I sometimes wonder about the whole playing of the national anthem, whether that's the thing to do. It is a marvelous ritual in a way. That's the other thing that we see about the Olympics. It's ritualized, and the putting on of the gold medal over the neck and the playing the national anthem of the winner really is a big part of the ritual, and that's good. It releases emotions. Ritual gives space to feel and so on. I noticed what some of the athletes said was, what were they thinking during that time? And most of them were not thinking about, I love my country. The playing of the national anthem was like a backdrop for them to have a few moments of savoring the victory, of going back over all of the frustrations of the past, of thinking of their family who contributed to their opportunity, of the training they did and so on. It released something, but I don't think it really released so much a nationalistic spirit. It released more victory that was going on.
Well, what would you propose, having maybe one Olympic song that would you take that away from?
Theme of the common man or something. I don't know what you would do. I think that Bill Bradley, I think it was, had suggestions about the Olympics of trying to play down certain nationalistic sides of it. He had suggestion that all the participants should be honored. You get a medal for participating, that's the big thing. And you would get a gold medal only if you broke a world record or an Olympic record. In other words, the point would be that you would be striving against the highest standard that was ever set, and that would be what would involve you in getting the medal. It might be a way of getting beyond some of this nationalistic spirit. But I think your question about the European reaction, not just Europe but around the world, it was that we were involved in excessive nationalism. And to me, that cuts into the power of the symbol again. And that's there. I mean, we're number one and all of this business. You know, we got this big country with all these people and opportunities and terrific, so we beat some tiny little country. I mean,
beat on Uruguay.
Yeah, what does this mean? You know, I mean, there's not a fairness about it. And I don't think it's what the Olympic movement is all about. I mean, it's true as a pride in the achievement of the athletes from one's own country. I think that's good, but that again, in my mind, cuts in on this, what I think is the cultural power of the Olympics to speak to us of something bigger than nationalism. So we would have to find our own way, I think, of getting around all of this. Now, let me tell you some of the ways that I think that the Olympics have moved towards being a more what I would call comprehensive symbol. One of the ways is that more nations have participated. I think in 1896 something like 13 nations participated. Now we're up to 140 despite the boycott. I think it's the most that ever participated. So you're more and more getting people from around the world. I mean, some countries that just sent a few athletes, it seemed important for them to be represented. They were part of the family of nations, and that seemed good to me. Also, there's the growing participation of women in the Olympic movement. I think back in 1908, if I'm not mistaken, they did some minor events, but then in 1928 they had more track and field. They entered the track and field events, and now we move to the case where there's so many more events for women, and we had the marathon for the women. I'm going to get off on it. Tell me just some of your reactions to the women's events or the participation of the women.
We touched on the volleyball team, women's volleyball team, and the women's basketball team also. But I read about the volleyball team a lot and saw a lot of those close-up profiles, and just their dedication, and was amazing to me. And again, we touched on early before in another show about the marathon, the women's marathon, and how that they had a very traumatic or very moralistic happening there with the women from Switzerland coming in and stumbling in. But just to see that, I guess me as a male, I'm not as aware of it, but as my girlfriend Laura tells me, hey, there's a lot more to this than just men's sports.
Yeah,
and I think that's an overall happening in general, at least in this country.
Right, and a great gain, I think. What it does is it makes the symbol of the Olympics more comprehensive again. This worldwide thing that I'm looking for. And let me tell you another thing that I think was, they had for the first time this year the wheelchair races as a demonstration event, not Special Olympics, a demonstration event in the Olympics, just like tennis was in baseball. And here you had these marvelously trained athletes racing in the wheelchairs. And Frank Gifford was the one who was commenting on it, and he said that they think of themselves as the physically challenged, not as the physically disabled. And he used that language throughout, the physically challenged. And they don't want to think of themselves, as disabled or handicapped in some way. They're challenged in a new way. And here they trained hard, and they got to perform before thousands of people in the Coliseum, and seen around our globe by millions of people and so on. That, I think, was a fantastic thing. It again broadens out our understanding of what the Olympics are all about, that you've got this comprehensive kind of symbol going here, so that the whole human family can participate in it, even the physically challenged. Exactly. Not just for the very
able-bodied and the fortunate.
Right. So you've got that side. In other words, that's a way I see, again, of this symbol working well. And I think that the whole idea of people being able to watch around the world, in other words, there were the athletes who participated, but then you got to think of the spectators, what it meant to us. And again, I think it's just part of having this common memory of that we share that many people have. Now, around all this, it really is the ritual side of it, because there is so much of the ritual that goes on. There was the 9,000-mile torch relay that as we ran the torch from New York to Los Angeles. And what was neat about that was you had famous people. Muhammad Ali ran it, but you had people that no one ever heard about. You had old people, a 5-year-old girl, a 92-year-old man, I think it was. And you had this great outpouring of spirit. That's ritual that allows deeper things to happen. Not only that, but you have the official lighting of the Olympic flame, which is a moment people look forward to. You get the parade of the athletes into the stadium and the carrying of the flags and so on. You have the draping of the medals over the necks of the winners, the playing of the national anthem. I noticed the boxers exchange flags and so on. Then the closing ceremonies were so terrific, the handing of the flag over to the next host city and so on. And the athletes parading in, and the partying afterwards, and so on. All of this is ritualized activity, the extinguishing of the Olympic flame. And what ritual does is help to put the symbol into a larger context. It enriches the symbol. It's those kind of things that stick in our memory and that we carry with us. And then there's expectations built up around that. So every year, that's what the athletes dream about and wait for, that Olympic medal being put over my neck. Or next time there's the torch lighting and so on. It becomes part of just the way we think as a whole human community.
I think the idea of the symbol and the powerfulness of the symbol, when I was reading about Racer Johnson, when he was informed only about a week before the Olympics that he was chosen, and he said that he was in awe, and just that he actually trained for this. Like he ran up and down steps, he had to run up the steps of the Coliseum, and he trained for it, and each time he ran up those Coliseum steps, even in training, when he turned around, he was overwhelmed with emotion just as he visioned, 100,000 people in that stadium. And that was amazing that the symbol took on such a powerful effect for him, that even in training, when there's people just setting up, and maybe 4 or 5 and 140 or 50 people, whatever, just sitting there working on it, he turns around and he gets welled up. I imagine what the emotion was when he actually did that.
Indeed. And that's a really good example of the way ritual works. And I think O.J. Simpson said the same thing. He said I think that running in the carrying the torch was for him right up there with winning the Heisman Trophy. I think, if I recall right, he handed it on maybe to a physically challenged youngster or small person, and that was a big, a very moving kind of moment. Again, what it's speaking to us is of the commonness of the human family. That we're on spaceship Earth. I mean, what we're seeing, hey, our destiny is common. We're going to make it together, or we're going to go down the tubes together. And we need the things that draw out our better aspirations. Wars, we had so much of that, and strife, political. The Olympics stand as another thing. It's a flawed symbol, as you pointed out very well. It's flawed by nationalism, by the boycotts, by commercialism, and so on, no doubt about it. But inherent in the whole idea of gathering people from around the whole world to participate, there is something healthy in my mind. It speaks to us of our deepest aspirations for excellence, for putting emphasis on effort rather than success, of playing the game, of being involved, of brotherhood, of sportsmanship, of getting along, and of transcending all of the problems that bug us. So for us believers, the religious symbols do that, but we need our secular symbols to remind us of the same thing.
You've been listening to Reflections with your host, theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Joining Father Bacik in this discussion was Brad Rieger, a graduate student in special education at the University of Toledo. The topic of this week's Reflections was Olympics as an international symbol. Comments or questions on the show, or suggestions for future topics, should be sent to Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Campaign of the Diocese of Toledo.